I think it was the vision. I think I knew what it would take to be successful. I knew this was a big piece of it. And just from people I talked to, they said, if you want to do something, it's never going to work out the first time. You got to just keep pushing, and it's just a time game. It's like kind of the perseverance thing.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you enjoy this show, if you're getting great value, leave us a rating and review. We want to hear what you love about the show, but also get some feedback. Anything we can do to work harder for your investing goals, we'd love to hear about that. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show, one I've been looking forward to. We're going to be talking to Cole Farrell. Cole Farrell is the founder and CEO of Vulcan Capital. Now, he owns a growing portfolio of real estate in Pennsylvania, and he is the host of the Multifamily Mastery Meetup, a local multifamily real estate investment association in the Lehigh Valley. Now, he is a licensed real estate agent, and he also used to be a professional property manager. Let's welcome to the show, Cole Farrell.
What's up, John? How are you?
I'm great. Hey, Cole, listen, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Absolutely. I'll run through my story real quick, and it's very long. I'm going to try to shorten that up. So the gist is I started investing when I was 18. I was going to school for my bachelor's in finance, and I knew I wanted to run a business, but I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do. So I ended up meeting somebody with a portfolio of real estate in Easton in the Lehigh Valley, and we went to dinner. We ended up building a relationship. And I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I had no money, and he kept talking about OPM, other people's money. And I eventually was like, hey, would you sell or finance something? And that's how I got my first 2 unit, because he said yes. And that 2 unit was a learning curve. There was evictions, lawsuits, drug dealer tenants, I mean, the whole nine. And I ended up doing the reno myself as they turned, and I had no idea what I was doing with renos. I would go to Home Depot, YouTube, ask the guys there, how do you fix this? And just kind of figured it out. But as it stabilized, I kind of realized its potential and said, okay, this is pretty awesome. How do I build this? And so I started on my personal development journey at that point and started going through the reading, the learning, all that kind of things. And like Bigger Pockets and podcasts weren't big then, just starting to ramp up. And so I was just kind of touching on that stuff. And I just started going to meetups, which were kind of just emerging, at least for me. I didn't really know about them, and met a lot of good people there. And in that time, I ended up buying 7 more units, then another unit, and then 3 more units. And with that, I didn't really have any money. So I learned how to raise money from family and kind of pitch in deals and partner. And I didn't really know that's what that was. I just kind of, again, figured it out, put it together. And I was bartending my way through college during that. And that's when COVID hit. And I thought that was an awesome opportunity to take things to the next level. So I was like, you know what? I have some experience in this. Why don't I start a management company? And so I called someone I met at one of these meetups that had a management company. I said, hey, will you help guide me and we'll work something out? And they're like, sure. So we went to coffee, we talked about it. And they said, hey, very politely, you maybe not know enough. Like, maybe you should come work for me for a little bit and learn the ropes. And I was like, you know what? That sounds good. So I ended up doing professional management with them for about 2 years. And I learned how to get clients, how to do construction, contractor management, leasing, the whole nine. And through that, I ended up hating it though. And so I fired my clients and I was looking for the next avenue. But going through that kind of transition, the owner of the firm became an awesome mentor to me and just a friend. And so we were figuring out that we worked really well together, but we didn't know how to what to do with that. So we kept talking about flipping and wholesaling and wholetailing, and we ended up saying, hey, let's try it. So we started doing more wholetail stuff, and it was really good. We did a lot of direct mail, and we got good at that. And so we still hold that company today, or that partnership. And we do about maybe 8-ish deals a year as kind of like a side gig and just to keep funneling things through. But through all that experience, I kind of learned what I did and didn't like. And so I realized that large multi was kind of the way I wanted to go. And that's what I thought I would be good at. And now I had, the experience, or enough experience, to dive in, and kind of the credentials and a little bit of financial backing to go for it. And so that's when I started my company, Vulcan Capital, hired a coach who was super experienced that could help me through all the pitfalls. And I started looking for my first deal and started raising, and found a deal through a mailer, challenged to take it to the table, but got it done. And we ended up raising about 400,000, and it was just about $1 million deal. So we just closed that a few weeks ago, and that's kind of where I'm at now.
I love it, man. Listen, a lot of great insights. So, when you're at 18, you kind of started getting your feet wet in real estate and learning kind of the business and, you know, finding this first deal, you know, that seller financing opportunity from this guy you met and kind of growing and figuring things out by yourself, doing the rehab renovation yourself, meeting different connections, kind of working more as the property management side of it, and then ultimately transitioning into multifamily and kind of scaling your portfolio there. You said a couple things, man, that jumped out to me. And one thing that jumps out in your story is you kept taking action. And I think, you know, starting when you're 18, a lot of people just don't know what they want to do at that age, right? They're kind of floundering around and just trying to figure it out. And, you know, we'll see what happens. And you kind of knew you wanted to get into real estate. So what was it that gave you that clarity or that vision that real estate is what you wanted to focus on back at that age?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two pieces to it. So I was blessed where my dad was very supportive, and he owned a business, and he does Corvette restoration. Now, why that's important is because in the muscle car world or the car world and the restoration world, Corvettes are kind of like the top tier. So his clients were very high net worth individuals, and just successful people all around. And something he always did that we always talked about at home was, he would always ask him, what do you do for work? Or, how did you get to where you are? And almost every single one of them was, I own a business and I invest in real estate, over and over and over. And so we talked about that, and he was very supportive, saying, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, you know what? Like, I clearly, you do a business, they do business. I think that's something I want to do. I think that's a good fit. And obviously, they all invest in real estate. So let's jump in. And so through these people, we just started setting up dinners and things like that to chat about it. And this guy that I met in Easton was one of those people. And we talked about it through dinner and things like that. And I loved his lifestyle, his freedom, just the potential there. And I thought that was, for me, a perfect fit of what I wanted to do. I think that's kind of where it spawned from.
Man, that's great to hear, man. And you just gave some great insight. So one, you know, learning from your father and the business he ran, the clients he had, and asking people, what did you do to get so successful? And the two answers that kept popping up are owning a business and investing in real estate. And that allowed you to have that clarity at a young age. And I know a lot of people wish maybe they had the foresight earlier in their life or had that clarity and maybe didn't have that kind of exposure, but this is one of those things where I think it's a twofold insight. One is owning a business, investing in real estate. A lot of us who are listening to this know that by now. Are we teaching this to our children? Are we teaching the people around us? Are we showing them, you know, how to succeed? Be that example, give them that exposure. That's something we should be thinking about. And I think your dad did a great service to you by allowing you to have that exposure so you can kind of have that clarity and reach your own conclusion early on. The second thing though is that you still had to kind of hold your own weight, man. Even though you had exposure to some of these clients, you know, just because you're a, you know, smart, likable kid doesn't mean they're going to invest with you or partner with you. So, what are some of the things you did to kind of earn their respect and trust that you could partner with them or at least get a chance to do business with them?
Yeah, excellent question. I think one of the biggest things that I always took up on, something that I went through, was I did whatever it took to earn their respect. And I would constantly ask them, what do you need? And it just comes back to the whole value conversation, right? How can I provide value to that other person? So the guy that I met in Easton, who was fantastic, one of the things that we did is, like I said, we go to dinner, but I was always like, what are you working on? What do you need help with? And he would just always have something going on. He ran a daycare, for example, and he built this train of like 55-gallon containers and whatever. He said, hey, can you take a day and paint this whole thing for me? Because I did the car thing, so I knew how to paint. And I said, absolutely. I got no money for that, no anything for that, but that's part of the game. So I went in and did that, and it was a lot of those things. I mean, we probably built a relationship over 2 or 3 years before anything happened. And just, we set up meetings, and I was there on time and just did whatever it took. And I think that's kind of what helped.
Another great insight, you know, just doing what it takes, build the relationship and without the ask, you know, don't do it because, hey, you know, this person has money and you're going to ask them to invest. Start building those relationships. And once you're adding value to them, you know, the opportunities for you will come to fruition, you know, and they want to see, hey, is this somebody who's going to be willing to help me without asking for stuff? Because people who are successful, you know, people ask them for stuff all the time. So you're not helping them by
Right.
asking them, you know, questions or picking their brain or things like that, but actually helping to solve their problem. And that's what you were able to do. You know, hey, what do you need right now? I just need someone to paint this tank. Okay, great. I can do that. And if you're stepping in and adding value to people like that, it comes back. So that's a really great insight for anyone who's trying to get started and try to build and grow on that network and go from there. Let's talk about kind of that transition though. And before we do, you mentioned that, you did some wholesale type deals, you had some rentals, you did some wholetail type deals. Some folks may not be familiar with the wholetail term. Can you explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, so the best way I found to explain it is wholesale is when you find a killer deal and you never take ownership of it, but you sell it to somebody else. And you're essentially selling that contract to somebody else. So, like I said, you don't take ownership, you find the deal, you get it under agreement, and you pretty much sell that contract at a price to somebody who wants it for more. And then you take that split. Um, Wholetail is where you do buy it, you do take time, sometimes even a few hours, and you sell it shortly after. So for instance, we find a lot of deals where we'll buy something, take ownership of it, and we don't do anything to it. We'll just maybe clean it out because usually they're vacant, and then we'll just go talk to another investor, or we'll even list it and just get a much higher price. But just because we took them out of a bad situation and helped them out, we're able to achieve that gap.
You kind of have this hotel and partnership. You are starting to, grow and identify your own deals, build some traction. Talk to us about kind of that inflection point. At what point did you get from, thinking you can and saying, okay, you know what, let's go into multifamily, let's scale this business and make that kind of transition.
Yeah, I think for me it was a lot of the who are you around affects what you think. So I started as I progressed through all those different stages, I started being around more and more influential people, and I think that really started changing my mindset. Where the guy that I did management with, for instance, they had an awesome portfolio, and I went from zero, what I was doing and I knew nothing about, to being around those guys, and that was like a culture shock. And everybody they knew had hundreds of units. And so I was like, wow, this is another world. And so it's funny because there's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing, obviously, because I'm around those guys, which was incredible. But the curse was you try to compete with them and you try to catch up, which is just very difficult. But overall, it's definitely a good thing. But I think just being around those people and seeing what they're doing and try to mimic that and learn from it.
Yeah, I think too, like you mentioned, even when you were doing the property management and you're trying to do it by yourself, and the guy's like, wait a minute, I don't think you're ready for this. Like, why don't you come work for me and kind of grow and scale that way? And it really comes down to, for me at least, building credibility, building credibility in yourself. But I'm sure you also build your confidence, going through those steps and those processes. And we like to talk about the three C's to attract capital: confidence, credibility, and connections. And it sounds like those are the things you were really building on at this time, right? Building up your confidence through the knowledge. And again, confidence is from actual knowledge and preparation, not just because you had this weird belief that you can do anything, right? So you were putting in the reps, putting in the reps, learning how to rehab, learning the construction side of it, learning the property management side of it, analyzing deals, building these relationships with people, building a credibility by taking all these steps, and then ultimately expanding your network. So you're building your connections. And I think those are key insights for everyone to understand how you're able to scale and grow. Let's talk about kind of the meetup, because you mentioned you were going to meetups and meeting people there, and eventually you launched your own meetup. So what really was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I noticed that when I went to the meetups originally, I met these people and that was awesome. And it took me a couple years, honestly, to realize that those people all were the most valuable connections that I ever made, no matter what I did. And so I started realizing the more meetups I went to, the more connections I made and the better my whole investing experience became. And so that I kind of transitioned to. I wanted to get into the large multi, but there was no large multi meetup around to make those connections or to kind of foster that. So I said, you know what? I've been good at putting people together and running that kind of thing on my own, just with family, friends, or whatever it may be. And I was like, I think I could do this. And so I kind of just put it together and started the meetup. And it was difficult at first. I mean, it was the first one I threw together and I tried the best I could and invited the world, and 7 people showed up, and they were all my 7 investor buddies. And there was no good format. We just kind of chatted. And so I went through probably 6 months of figuring the whole thing out. But it was incredible. And the meetup I noticed brought a ton of credibility once it was established. So that was a massive learning curve. Absolutely great results out of it. So
Yeah, I love that because, that can be dejecting for a lot of people, right? And you're going through the process, you launch this event, 7 people show up, and I'm sure you were hoping for a lot more than seven. And maybe most people would have said, you know what, I'm not gonna I'm not going to do this or it didn't work, but you stuck with it. So what's the difference for you? Why'd you decide to stick with it as opposed to maybe throwing your hands up and walking away at that point?
I think it was the vision. I think I knew what it would take to be successful. I knew this was a big piece of it. And just from people I talked to, they said, if you want to do something, it's never going to work out the first time. You got to just keep pushing, and it's just a time game. It's like kind of the perseverance thing. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a year. Let's give it 1 year. And if I give it my all and I put everything in this for a year and, keep filtering, keep learning, keep putting that back in, if I do not see any benefits after that, then I'll cut my losses. And it was what it was. I was like, let's give it a shot. And I think every month I saw the improvement. And once that year hit, I realized, this is definitely worth it. It was difficult, but this is 10 times what it was before. So let's keep going and see where it goes for another year and just kind of keep going from there.
Yeah, and so much of this is patience, and just sticking with it and learning and adjusting. It's not to say that, hey, just keep doing exactly the same thing over and over, but learn. Okay, what do we do wrong with that first one? What can we adjust? What can we learn from? What else can we do to help? And the more you make those tweaks and adjustments and get that feedback, the more successful you're going to be. And then hopefully you can get the results you're looking for. So great insight right there. Let's talk about your first syndication, right? You just completed your first syndication. I know you've done plenty of deals prior to that, but this was your first syndication. Just walk us through kind of the process and, what were some key steps along the way to make this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So at an overview, I got into the syndication stuff and I read all the books, right? I had like the general gist, but I noticed the problem was I didn't know what to do once problems came up. And I could try to figure them out, but I know in my circle, I just didn't have anybody that did that. And I didn't know who to go do that. And I didn't know how to figure out the best answer. And a lot of it was on a relatively quickly time frame. I needed to know. So that's when the coach, and I thought that was going to be a huge thing, and it was. That absolutely expedited my progress. So that I think was a key point. And learning, I think it was step by step. It's I want to say, just you start somewhere, you just keep putting in the effort and keep going through that, I guess. And eventually we got to close. And so there's so many lessons learned that, we can dive into. But
Yeah, man. You mentioned, coaching being a big part of it, and I'm a firm believer in that on both sides. We still I still work with my coach, and we obviously do coaching as well, and I think that it is just key, and it's for the reason you said, right? It's you could potentially learn a lot of this stuff in books and whatnot, but when you've got a live deal and live opportunities, and you've got a phone call tomorrow, that is not the time to be scrambling and try to figure something out, right? If you could find someone who has the blueprint, who is in your corner, who's supporting you, so that's critical. And I think when we talk about building that network, that's a component that I think gets overlooked sometimes. It's not just having investors in your network and having property managers, but having that person you can rely on and say, hey, I actually don't know the answer to this, or I'm stuck. Can you
mhm,
help me, or can you help guide me? That's critical because these investors are investing a significant amount of capital, right? I mean, this isn't like a $500 investment. Typically, they're doing $25,000, $50,000, and they're trusting you. They're trusting that will take care of their investment. And especially if this is your first deal, you obviously don't have all the experience in the world. So you need to borrow and leverage that experience from someone else. And a mentor or coach is great for that. You mentioned some of the challenges along the way. Could you just give us maybe some things that either surprised you or didn't show up in any of the books that or the podcasts that you were listening to?
yeah, absolutely. So I guess one of the first most important ones for me was um, they always say, you find a good deal, the money will follow. And we always talk about that, but it's just not necessarily true. So I found a killer deal and I was so ready to go, and I did everything right, the whole planning, and I shot the email out and I talked to everybody, and I figured, 3 days, 5 days, this will be fully funded, everyone's going to jump on board. And it just wasn't the case. There was a lot of uncertainty, and it was partially track record, partially age, all sorts of things. And I realized that was a big piece of it. Is just the first raise is difficult, definitely difficult. But through that, just persevere, keep trying, keep looking, and eventually come through with that. Um, there were some good surprises too, though. I know personally the books always talk about the SEC docs and that whole segment, and I was personally very nervous or afraid of that. And I was curious how that would run. What do I have to do? What does the paperwork look like? I just was so unsure. And going into that, we found an attorney, and they were actually much less expensive than I thought they would be, and the process was very easy. So that was one of the good things that came out of it. Um, So those are two to name a few. I'm trying to think of some other ones that we haven't.
I like what you called out, right? Because for anyone watching on video, they can see you're a fairly youthful person, right? You're in your 20s, and that age and experience. Even though you've done a lot in the real estate space, right? I mean, you've been investing in or doing stuff in real estate for almost a decade at this point. So it's not that you don't have any experience, but this was your first syndication. So people are going to be a little bit more apprehensive, and I think that's a challenge everyone faces on their first deal, right? First time you do anything, well, you don't have a track record, you don't have experience. So people are going to be a little bit more apprehensive about investing with you. Yet you were still able to overcome some of those objections. Of course, not with everyone, but with many of those investors, they got comfortable to move forward. What do you think it was that made them comfortable to invest with you, given that this was your first syndication?
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest thing was, well, I guess there's two things. I think it was a passion and I want to say a confidence to it. There was so much passion behind when I talked to these people. They knew that this wasn't just like a fly by night thing. This wasn't, I'm going to do this deal and then let's see what happens. Maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. It was, this was the choice. This was the career path. And then the confidence I think came in where I would explain to them and I kind of showed like I will do whatever it takes to make sure this is successful. And if it's not, then I will do whatever it takes to make sure you're repaid. So either way, I wanted to make sure that they won and I wanted to make sure that they understood that no matter what happens, I'll have their back.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we said earlier, right? Confidence, credibility, connections, and I think it came through very clearly that again you were prepared. Confidence meaning that you were prepared. You mentioned that it was a killer deal, which we're going to get into in a second, right? So killer deal, the credibility of being in that market, knowing the deal, knowing the numbers, having that experience, maybe not as a syndicator, but investing in managing in that area, and then of course the connections. And I know some of those connections came from the relationships you've built, but just talk to us more about that aspect, right? Talk to us about the deal itself, and we don't have to get deep into numbers, but what made this a killer deal in your eyes?
Yeah. So what I loved about this deal was one, the location. It was in a fantastic location, so that makes things easy. Number two, the building was in great shape, but the rents compared to the shape were very off. So the rents were very, very low, whereas they should be much, much higher without doing anything. So that was a giant bonus for this. And then besides that, it was the tenant base. I like that. I've gone through a lot of transitions where it's very rough tenants and the evictions are very messy. And I noticed with the tenants, talking to them, going through that with the owners and dealing with the owners, that everybody was very well mannered, very respectful, things like that. And although that doesn't always stick, it just makes the transition and the stabilizing a little bit easier. So those are just a couple things that I liked about it.
You mentioned the location was one of the things. Like, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, what was it about that location that stood out to you?
Absolutely. So this property is in Northampton, and if anybody's familiar with the Lehigh Valley, it's a suburb kind of Allentown, which is a huge metro. And one of the things that is great about this just whole area is it's a major distribution hub. So, for instance, the whole Lehigh Valley is within 8 hours of. I'm sorry, if you're a truck driver and you were in the Lehigh Valley, you could drive to, I think it's 80% of the country, if I got that right, within 8 hours, which is a huge thing because regulations limit that. And so for us, this is a major hub and it's just growing and growing and growing. And so this area is just a growing population, growing jobs, and everything points to it's just a good market to be in. Mixed with its smaller location, it's just in a nice neighborhood, it's near a park, very family oriented. So just good for like the tenant base, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think that's really key, man. And even just listen to explain that, you clearly are familiar with the area and not just the macro market, but the sub market. And that familiarity allows you to move and navigate in a way that maybe other investors couldn't. So again, you have a competitive advantage, you have an edge there. And that's one of the things that allowed you to kind of pounce on this deal and this opportunity. And if I'm not mistaken, this was kind of an off market opportunity. Just talk about how you got this deal. How did you actually find this opportunity and get it under contract?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do the wholesale stuff, we do a lot of direct mailers. So we have a little letter, it's a little yellow letter and a small envelope, and we send those out to everybody and anybody that fits our criteria. And not many people mail to the larger units, which makes sense just because it's different clientele. But I figured, you know what, let's just try it. It's a couple bucks, let's see what happens. And so I made a mailer, made it a little more formal to cater to that, and sent it out. And I got a couple responses, mostly tire kickers, things like that. But these people responded and they said, "Hey, let's chat." And it's funny because I actually thought when they described it the first time, the whole conversation, we understood it was an 18 unit. And so it's a little bit different. And then once we learned that it was a 9 unit, it was still fantastic, but it just took a different vibe, I guess. But this one was fully off market, and we just worked with those sellers from start to finish. But it was a very messy process. So they reached out, they said, let's set up a meeting. I said, okay, great, come to our office. And then they reached back out, hey, never mind. And then they reached back out a couple months later, hey, let's set up that meeting again. And then, a couple of days goes by, you know what, we want to wait 2 months. And so it was a year before we even got to sit down. Um, and then once we sat down, it was still a couple months because they wanted to do a 1031 and they weren't ready and they wanted to find the property they wanted to transfer to. And so that took some time. And then we finally got it under agreement. And then just, little things happen. They didn't get their documents in time, so things get pushed. So point being, the direct to owner definitely has its challenges, but it was really cool to be able to help them and see their inner story, where it's not just, right to a broker and it's all numbers and finance. We really helped them achieve what they were trying to achieve and had like a great relationship throughout. So I think that was a kind of a cool difference.
I think it's cool too, even as like an LP investor, because you've got this off-market deal that you've been, nurturing for a year, so you kind of had a direct to owner. You've been building that relationship, talking to them, and you were able to get this thing under contract and bring it kind of to close. And as an investor, it's great because we know you found a real opportunity, right? So you found this opportunity, you sourced the deal. Again, you're local, you understand the market. There's a lot to like there. So I think that kind of sets you up and puts you in a really unique position kind of going forward, not just with that deal, but, in the market. What's next? What are you working on moving forward? What should we expect from Vulcan Capital in the future?
Yeah, so I think I learned a lot from this, and I learned that this property, no matter how big or small, I should say, is just a lot of work. And it seems like that it's better to go to a bigger property and put in the same amount of work than do it on a smaller one. Now, obviously, you have to build up to that, right? So uh, this one is fantastic and a perfect fit. But I think the next one, I want to go a little bigger, and I want to shoot for hopefully a 50 unit. And then, long story short, I want to try to hit 100 by the end of the year, and then it's road to 1,000. And there's obviously reasons for all those numbers are not just random, but I think that's what I'm headed towards, and it's a path.
Well, I love it. Well, Cole, we look forward to watching and seeing what you do next. For those who want to learn more, you can go to vulcancapital.com. That's VOLCAN capital.com. And then if they want to learn more about your meetup, is that on the Vulcan Capital website, or where do you have information about that?
It is. It's on the website. It's to MMM. You can click that. You can join our Facebook page. And if you go onto Facebook and you just search Multifamily Mastery Meetup, it should also pop up.
Awesome. All right, Cole, we're going to go to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Ready?
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Yeah, so I think my first duplex, I tried to get that financed, and I tried to come up with the money to no avail. And I think that led me to the creative strategies like partners, raising, seller finance. And so I think that kind of apparent failure really helped.
All right, give me the digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Yes, there's a thing called Trello, and that is fantastic for me and my team. We use that all the time, every day. It's free, it's very easy. Highly recommend.
All right, give me the book you've recommended the most or gifted the most in the last year.
It has to be Vivid Vision. I just think you need to know where you're going and what you're trying to achieve in order to get there.
All right, Vivid Vision. We'll have to check that one out. All right, give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Every day I go through my tasks and I pick out or I create mins, and mins are your most important next step. And these are the things that actually move the needle, actually progress you to get further, not just, urgent tasks or important tasks. And so I pick 3 of these every day, and I make sure that if they're not already on there, I create them. And that is definitely my priority and helps me move forward.
I like that. That's a good one. Creating those mins. All right, give me your number one insight for multifamily investing.
I would say perseverance. I think there's always going to be challenges and obstacles, whoever you are. And I think it's just a matter of overcoming those. And if you just keep putting in the time and the reps, you will eventually break through. So I think it's just a time game, and just keep putting in the effort, and there's nothing that you can't accomplish.
I love it, man. All right, you are out there in Lehigh Valley, man. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
So I am not a big foodie, and I love a home cooked meal, and I'm gonna get a little flack for this, but if I had to pick, I would say Applebee's Fiesta Lime
All
Chicken.
right. All right. Applebee's. I love it, man. All right. Listen, you gave us a lot of great insights, Cole. I mean, for me, I love hearing your story and just watching the growth that you've had and really helping us understand like what it was like making that transition, building up your confidence, building up your credibility, building your connections, and then focusing on that first syndication deal. Some of the challenges that you faced, overcoming those objections, demonstrating to people why they should believe in you, why they should believe in the deal, and ultimately getting that across the finish line and your vision now to grow and continue to add more units in this area and scale that portfolio. Again, for anybody who wants to learn more, just check out vulcancapital.com, VOLCAN capital.com. Cole, I want to thank you again for being a great guest. We look forward to staying in touch, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, John. You too.